The 15-year-old boy stood trembling in the shattered doorway, still gripping the phone that was quietly recording. In front of him, his drunken father screamed and charged. But the boy didn't step back, because tonight, he was no longer the silent child behind the door. He was the final voice of the mother who hadn't spoken in over a year. And then, the police burst in. Everything changed, in the span of a single breath. If you believe in stories that leave you speechless and unable to look away, make sure to subscribe to our channel today. Every episode tells a truth, painful but necessary to hear. And trust us, you won't want to miss a single moment we share. Snow fell like a secret over the quiet edges of Manitoba, Canada. Soft, constant, uninvited. It blanketed the road like silence blankets a room where too much has already been said. The house at the end of the lane didn't look like it belonged to anyone anymore. Its shutters stayed drawn, its roof sagged. Even the chimney smoke seemed cautious, like it didn't want to draw attention. Inside, the only sound came from pencil against paper. Liam sat hunched over the dining table, his back stiff, his legs curled under him, writing out algebra problems beneath the amber glow of a single flickering light. He was 15, tall for his age, sharper around the eyes than most boys, but quieter too. A boy who had learned to shrink himself, not by accident, but by necessity. A boy who never dropped things, never raised his voice, never asked twice. Across the room, Emma moved slowly in the kitchen. She was graceful in a broken-winged kind of way. Her presence felt more like a hush than a person. Every motion, cutting vegetables, stirring the soup, was careful, almost reverent. She didn't hum. She didn't talk. She hadn't for almost a year. Not since the accident. Liam watched her without turning his head. He didn't need to see her directly to know what she was doing. She cooked the same way every night. Quiet hands, quiet breath. A piece of paper always folded on the counter beside her. A small notepad she used to speak. He saw her write something now, just a short sentence. Probably a reminder. Maybe soup's ready. Maybe do your homework. Maybe I'm sorry. But before she could place it on the table, the front door creaked open. The air shifted. Mark entered the room like a cloud of smoke. Slow, heavy, and suffocating. He smelled like diesel and cold metal and something else beneath that. Something fermented. His shoulders were wide, his boots heavy on the hardwood, his silence louder than anything else in the room. Emma froze with the pen still in her hand. Liam didn't look up. He just gripped his pencil tighter as if afraid it might tremble. Mark's eyes swept the room once, then landed on Emma. She held the note out to him, two hands like an offering. He took it, read it. Then, without a word, he crumpled the paper slowly, each fold a violation, and tossed it into the sink. Water hissed softly as the paper soaked and drowned. Emma blinked. Just once. Then turned back to the pot and stirred. Mark didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was a weapon sharpened over years of fear. It sliced through the room and reminded everyone exactly who held the blade. Liam's throat went tight. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe too loudly. He didn't need to look at his mother to know what was in her eyes. He had memorized that gaze, the one that begged him not to do anything, not to say anything, not to make it worse. He glanced at the clock. 6:02 p.m. Right on time. Mark always came home before dinner, after work, after drinking, after whatever it was he did that made the smell stick to his skin. He walked past Liam without a word, poured himself a glass of water, gulped it like whiskey, then tossed the glass in the sink without checking if it broke. It didn't, but the sound still made Liam's spine jolt. Then Mark disappeared down the hallway toward the living room, the sound of his footsteps eventually drowned out by the hum of the old television. Liam waited. 10 seconds, 20, 30, then he exhaled, quietly. Emma set down 2 bowls of soup, one in front of Liam, one at the end of the table where she never sat. She didn't eat with them. She hadn't in a long time. He looked up at her and she offered him a half smile, just enough to say, I'm okay, even if she wasn't. And he nodded back, just enough to say, I know, even if he didn't. There were words between them, unspoken, thick and heavy. but neither of them had the language anymore to carry them. Liam stirred his soup with the edge of his spoon, listening to the sound of the TV murmuring from the next room. He wanted to say something, anything, but instead, he just swallowed the lump in his throat and focused on the math problem still half done on the page beside him. His handwriting was neat, straight, pressed too hard into the paper. There was a small stain in the corner of the page. Soup, maybe. Maybe something else. Emma stepped back from the table and went to the sink. She picked up the crumpled piece of paper Mark had thrown. It was soggy, nearly dissolved, but she still unfolded it carefully. Her fingers moved over it like she was trying to recover something sacred. Then she tossed it gently into the trash. She didn't cry. She never cried, not in front of Liam. She just wiped her hands, took a breath, and scribbled something new in the notepad. A single line. She tore the page, walked back to the table, and set it beside Liam's bowl. Then she disappeared into the hallway, soundless like snowfall. Liam waited until he was alone, then turned the note toward him. It read, "Eat slowly, it's still hot." He stared at the words for a long time, not because of what they said, but because he knew, somewhere beneath the ink, behind the careful letters, there was something else, something boiling, something that hadn't been spoken in months, something dangerous, the kind of silence that wasn't quiet, the kind that was waiting to be broken. The sound that always came back to him wasn't the crash, not the scream, not the broken things. It was the silence that followed. That was what haunted Liam the most. He didn't know what day it was anymore when he began replaying it. The day his mother lost her voice. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. One moment there had been a sound, a scream, a thud. The next, just silence. And it never came back. He'd been in the living room that night, headphones on, trying to drown out the argument swelling from the kitchen like a storm about to break. Mark's voice sharp and slurred, Emma's replies too soft to catch, until they weren't. Until there was a shout, something about respect and shutting up for good. Then a sudden shift. A scream, a crash, and silence. He tore the headphones off, heart hammering, and ran. The hallway was dim, a bulb flickering. At the top of the stairs, Emma was sprawled, body twisted in a way that made Liam's stomach sink. She wasn't moving. Mark stood 3 steps above, breathing heavily, fist clenched. "It was an accident," he'd muttered, already pulling out his phone. "She fell, slipped. You know how clumsy she is." But Liam didn't answer. He didn't know anything in that moment except that the house had stopped breathing. The hospital said it was vocal cord trauma. No permanent brain injury, no broken bones. But her ability to speak? Gone. Probably forever. Scar tissue, inflammation, damage they couldn't repair. She was released in 2 days. Mark didn't visit once. Now, months later, Liam sat in that same living room, lit only by the flicker of a muted TV and the low hum of the radiator, and let the memory settle over him like dust. He looked toward the hallway. Emma had gone to bed early. She always did. Her movements had become quieter since the accident. Not just physically, but in spirit, like she'd grown smaller to avoid casting a shadow. But Liam had been watching, paying attention. He saw how she carried paper with her everywhere, folded slips in her apron, under her pillow, sometimes hidden in her coat pockets. Sometimes she'd write something, then quickly crumple it and slip it inside a drawer or under a loose tile in the kitchen. She thought he didn't notice. He always noticed. He told himself he wouldn't invade her privacy, that if she wanted to say something, she'd write it to him directly. But the truth hung in the back of his mind like an unfinished sentence. What if she can't? What if she's trying but afraid? Tonight, as the wind scratched softly at the window panes and the pipes moaned like old ghosts, Liam moved quietly through the hallway and peeked into her room. She was asleep, barely, her head resting gently against the side of the mattress, one hand still on the notebook she always carried. Her chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. On the nightstand, a half-drunk cup of chamomile tea, cold now, a lamp still on. Her pen lay diagonally across the page. She never let him see what she wrote in there. And tonight, for the first time, she had forgotten to hide it. He hesitated. His breath caught. Then he stepped inside, barefoot on the worn wooden floor, careful not to make a sound. He reached for the notebook, then stopped. She stirred, softly, but didn't wake. He took it gently, stepped out, closed the door. Back in his room, Liam sat at the edge of his bed, heart pounding harder than it should have. The notebook felt heavier than paper. He opened it. Most pages were empty. A few had numbers, dates, times, then words, short entries. He grabbed my arm again today, told me I was lucky to have a roof. I can't cry when Liam is home. He'll hear, he'll ask. If I disappear, it's not the stairs. He said next time I try to leave, he won't miss. Liam swallowed hard. The words didn't feel like they were from his mother. They felt like someone else, a version of her he'd never known, a version that had been fighting a silent war inside that house for longer than he'd imagined. Then he found a small folded slip wedged between two pages, separate from the rest. His hands shook as he opened it. If you're reading this, it means I wasn't careful. It means you know. Don't be scared, baby. Not for me. Be smart, be quiet, but don't stop. The handwriting was slanted, hurried. He recognized the way she dotted her eyes, tiny circles like a child. It hit him then. Hard. She had never stopped trying to speak. She'd just been speaking in a language no one else wanted to hear. Liam sat in silence for a long time. The snow outside thickened, tapping at the window like a secret trying to get in. He thought about all the nights he'd heard the front door slam and pretended he was asleep. All the mornings his mother wore long sleeves even in July. The bruise once visible just beneath her collarbone. She said she hit a cabinet door. The way her hands flinched when Mark raised his voice. The way she never corrected him. The accident wasn't an accident. He knew it now, not in theory, not in doubt. He knew. And knowing did something to him. It straightened his back, hardened his jaw, set fire to the fog that had kept him quiet for too long. He couldn't fix her voice, but maybe, just maybe, he could help her speak. He turned off his bedside lamp and sat in the dark for a long time, the notebook still in his lap, its pages whispering truths that should have been shouted. He didn't know what he was going to do yet, but for the first time, he knew he had to do something. The silence was no longer protection. It was betrayal, and he wasn't going to be part of it anymore. The house creaked under the weight of wind and snow, the kind of sound that made old walls seem like they were sighing in their sleep. But Liam wasn't sleeping. He hadn't slept well in weeks. The notebook he'd read last night still sat on his desk, closed now, but louder than ever. He couldn't shake the words, couldn't unsee the way his mother curled into herself when she moved past Mark, couldn't pretend anymore that silence was safety. Something had shifted in him. He didn't know what he was looking for exactly, just that there had to be more. A notebook like that didn't exist on its own. People don't just write their fear on a whim. That kind of fear has layers. History. And history has hiding places. It was early, before the sun had even risen. But Liam slipped from his bed quietly, bare feet against cold floorboards. The hallway was still. Emma's door remained shut, but not locked. He wouldn't go in there again. Not yet. Instead, he walked past and entered the master bedroom, the room his parents had once shared. The bed was half made. The air still held a faint trace of Mark's cologne. Sharp, bitter, clinging to the curtains like old smoke. Liam walked slowly, careful not to disturb anything. His eyes scanned the room. Dresser drawers, closet corners, beneath the bed. Nothing obvious, but something about the wooden floor beneath the rug tugged at his thoughts. He moved the rug aside. A loose plank? His breath hitched. He knelt and pressed his fingers into the thin space between boards. One edge shifted slightly. He hooked his nails underneath and pulled. A hollow sound echoed. A space beneath. Dust billowed up, dry and ancient, like the bones of something buried long ago. Inside the small cavity was a plastic bag wrapped in layers of cloth. He lifted it out with shaking hands, placed it gently on the bed, and unwrapped it. A red leather-bound notebook, old, soft at the corners, the kind that didn't just hold words, but secrets. He opened to the first page. December 3rd, 2009. He threw the plate, said I was too slow again. Liam was 3. He cried. I told him it was thunder. Liam's chest tightened. He flipped the page. June 14th, 2010. He pushed me against the fridge, my arm bruised. I wore long sleeves. He said he didn't mean it, that I make him this way. More entries. October 2012. I was pregnant. He didn't stop. Told me if I told anyone he'd take the baby and make sure I never saw him again. February 10th, 2016. Liam asked why I flinched. I said it was a muscle twitch. He believed me. He shouldn't have. The words blurred. Not because the ink had faded. Because Liam couldn't see through the welling in his eyes. He didn't cry, but something inside him cracked. And kept cracking. His hands trembled as he flipped page after page, reading year after year of pain, of fear, of survival stitched with trembling fingers and aching silence. She had been writing her voice down this entire time, speaking in ink when no one would listen to her voice. He reached the most recent entries, written after the fall. March 2nd. I saw the way Liam looked at me. I don't want him to carry this, but I think he already is. April 12th. I don't care if I die, but I care if he becomes like Mark. May 6th. He watched Mark throw my note away. He didn't say anything, but I think he's watching. I hope so. He closed the book. His knuckles were white from gripping it. This wasn't just a journal. It was a record. A map. A slow-burning scream drawn out over 10 years. And he'd missed all of it. Liam stood, the notebook still in his hands, and walked out of the room like a man carrying something sacred. He didn't put the floorboard back, didn't cover it with the rug. He wanted the emptiness to stay open. Back in the hallway, he paused. Emma was awake, quietly folding clothes in the laundry nook, her head down, a gray sweatshirt in her hands. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. Her hands moved slowly, smoothing the fabric with the same tenderness she used for everything. Her silence filled the space between them like a tide. Liam just stood there watching her. How many times had she stood exactly like this? How many days had she walked with bruised ribs and steady hands? How many nights had she comforted him with made-up excuses while hiding the real pain somewhere behind her eyes? She turned slightly as if sensing him. Their eyes met. He didn't say anything. He just held the red notebook out in front of him. Emma froze. For a moment, the air thickened. Her eyes dropped to the book, then rose again, slowly. There was no panic in her face, only a soft, aching recognition, like someone who'd been waiting a long time for something inevitable to happen. She didn't reach for it, didn't gesture. She simply looked at him, a breath catching in her throat, not because of fear, but because of what it meant. He knew, and she knew that he knew. Something passed between them, an understanding. A line crossed not in anger, not in betrayal, but in love, in protection. Liam didn't say a word. He didn't need to. In his mind, one sentence echoed louder than the rest, clearer than all the noise, all the silence. If she can't speak, I'll speak for her. He turned and walked back to his room, the notebook still pressed against his chest. His heart beat hard beneath it. But this time, it wasn't just from fear. It was from purpose. Liam didn't tell anyone. Not his teachers, not his friends. What few he had. Not even his mother, though she watched him more closely now, as if trying to read something in the way he moved, the way he didn't speak unless necessary. He knew she sensed it, the shift, but this wasn't something he could talk about. It had to be done quietly. Like her pain, like everything they'd survived so far. So he waited until nightfall. Once the lights went out and Mark's snores echoed from the living room, too loud, too deep, like a man trying to drown his own conscience, Liam slipped out of bed, turned on his old laptop, and typed 4 simple words into the search bar. How to document abuse. The screen glowed blue against his face. The articles poured in, clinical and cold at first. Statistics, shelters, anonymous hotlines. But deeper in the threads, on forums where people wrote like they were confessing in the dark, he found what he needed. He read. Then he read more. It wasn't enough to say it happened. People didn't believe words. You had to show them. You had to make them watch. Video, one post read, was the only thing that made the courts listen. Another one warned to be careful. Some abusers sensed when things shifted, even without proof. That part stayed with him. So he planned. For the next 3 days, he said nothing. Just observed. watched the way Mark moved through the house like he owned the silence. How he opened a beer before noon on weekends. How his voice started low and slurred by dinner. How Emma flinched before he even raised his hand. Liam made a list in his notebook, separate from his school one, hidden inside a shoebox behind his desk. Times, places, patterns. He wasn't just a son anymore. He was an observer, a recorder, a witness. And then he ordered it. Cheap, discreet, delivered to a locker in town so it wouldn't show up on the porch. A mini camera, no bigger than a matchbox. It arrived in a box stuffed with brown paper and silence. He tested it on the windowsill of his room. The video was grainy, but the audio was crisp. He could hear every creak in the floorboards, every sigh from the hallway. That night, after Mark fell asleep in front of the TV, mouth open, beer can half spilled on the floor, Liam crept into the living room. The bookshelf was perfect, at eye level, angled toward the center of the room. Enough shadows to hide it, especially behind the row of old hunting magazines Mark never touched anymore. His hands didn't shake as he placed it. He felt calm, not brave, not afraid, just clear. The next day, he let it run. Mark was in a mood early. Emma hadn't warmed his eggs properly. Or maybe she had. It didn't matter. He found something to complain about. His voice rose, sharp and cutting, but not loud enough for a neighbor to hear. Just enough for it to sting behind closed doors. Liam sat at the table, pretending to do homework, while inside, he counted the seconds between Mark's insults and his mother's flinches. Later that night, Liam downloaded the footage. Watched it through headphones in his room, lit only by his monitor. It made his stomach twist. Mark slamming a beer can onto the counter. Mark yelling. Mark pacing back and forth, cursing at the ceiling like it owed him something. And Emma shrinking. Emma nodding. Emma clutching a towel against her chest like it was armor. But there was no strike, no shove, no blow. Not yet. Liam fast-forwarded, rewound, watched again. It was something, but not enough. He needed more. The next day, he adjusted the angle. Lower, capturing more of the kitchen. He thought about adding a second camera, maybe near the hallway, but decided against it. Too risky. Mark had a strange radar for change. So Liam waited, and the days fell into their routine of decay. Mark drank, muttered, sometimes screamed. Emma folded, cleaned, cooked, stayed silent. And Liam watched. Recorded, archived. One afternoon, Mark hurled a glass at the wall. It didn't hit anyone, but the sound shattered like a warning bell. The camera caught it perfectly, the trajectory, the explosion, the silence that followed. Liam clipped the footage, labeled it Threat, 3:43 p.m. Still, no contact, no visible injury, no blood, no bruise. He learned something in those days. Not about violence, but about how invisible it could be. How you could terrorize someone completely without leaving a mark, and how the system preferred marks. He documented everything. He started keeping a second log in a private cloud account. Each entry marked with date, time, behavior, emotional tone. He even color-coded them. He didn't know if anyone would care about the details, but he would have them ready. One night, after Mark passed out again, his body sprawled across the couch like a collapsed regime, Liam sat on the floor of his room and watched an interview of a survivor. A girl no older than him, telling her story through cracked lips and shaking hands. She said, "I knew I wasn't crazy when I saw it on tape. That's when I knew I wasn't making it up." That sentence stuck with him, not just because of the truth in it, but because of the fear. He worried about that moment, when his mother might one day look back at her life and wonder if she had imagined it all. If maybe she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too weak. He wouldn't let that happen, not on his watch. He looked across the room at the red notebook, still resting where he'd left it. This wasn't just about catching a man doing something wrong. It was about proving a woman had survived every time he did. It started with something small. That's usually how suspicion creeps in. The bookshelf in the living room had always been a mess. Magazines stacked sideways, old remote batteries scattered between dog-eared hunting books. A chipped ceramic mug Mark swore was from his father's cabin, even though no one had ever seen him use it. But now something was off. Mark stood still, one hand on his hip, staring at the third shelf from the top. He tilted his head slightly, like a man who couldn't quite put his finger on what was bothering him, but knew something was wrong. He leaned forward, ran a finger across the dustless edge. Behind him, Liam sat at the dining table, trying not to look up from his homework. His pencil moved too fast across the page. Meaningless equations, lines that didn't add up. Mark turned. "Did you touch my stuff?" His voice wasn't loud, but it vibrated under the floorboards like a low growl. Liam glanced up, eyes wide in manufactured confusion. "No, why?" Mark squinted. "That mug's not where I left it, and those papers were stacked different." Liam shrugged. "I dusted. Mom asked me to." He didn't flinch, didn't blink. Mark stared at him for a long time. The kind of stare that doesn't demand an answer, just makes you squirm enough to want to give one. But Liam had been practicing for this. For weeks now. He didn't squirm. Mark exhaled sharply through his nose and muttered something Liam couldn't make out before walking off, the floor groaning under his boots as he disappeared into the kitchen. Liam waited until he heard the fridge open, then close. Then a bottle cap hit the counter. Only then did he let his fingers unclench. The camera was still there, tucked just behind the shelf, perfectly angled, barely visible unless you were looking for it. But now he knew Mark was looking. Not directly. Not yet. But enough to make everything more dangerous. Later that night, the living room was dim and still again. TV flickering static, Mark snoring on the couch, half a beer can tilting in his grip. Emma moved quietly, picking up a dishcloth from the kitchen counter, folding it with slow precision. Her body was tired in the way that silence could be. Worn, patient, but alert. Liam walked into the room, glanced toward the shelf, then at her. She raised her eyes. Their gazes met in the low light, and in that 1 second, he felt more exposed than he had all day. Maybe it was the way she looked at him. Not just as a son, but as something more now. An accomplice. A reflection. He didn't speak. Instead, he stepped past the couch and into the hallway toward his room. But before he made it 10 steps, she reached out and touched his wrist. It was light, just enough to stop him. She held a small notepad in her other hand. Her eyes were pleading. She wrote quickly, "Don't do anything risky, please, he senses it." Then she flipped the page. "I've lived with this. I can keep living with it." Liam took the notebook gently from her fingers and wrote beneath it, "But should you have to?" She read it. Her throat moved as she swallowed. Her eyes welled. She didn't cry, not exactly, but tears gathered there, on the edge, like they didn't quite know if they had permission to fall. She shook her head, then wrote one last line. "I'm scared for you." He looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly. It was a printed still shot, black and white, from the footage the camera had taken. Mark, mid-shout, face twisted, hand clenched mid-air. Emma in the frame, shoulders hunched, eyes lowered. Liam placed the paper in her palm. She stared at it for a full 30 seconds. Her fingers trembled. Then she touched the image, gently, like it might crumble. When she looked back at him, her face had changed. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. But her eyes said thank you in a language no one else could ever translate. Liam leaned in and whispered just above breath, "We're not staying quiet anymore." She closed the notepad, and for the first time in a very long time, her hand rested briefly against his cheek before she turned away, carrying the paper with her into the shadows of the hallway. Back in his room, Liam sat at his desk staring at the ceiling. His heartbeat was slow, heavy, like something anchoring him to the floor. He knew now the game had changed. Mark felt it, Emma felt it, and so did he. This was no longer just about gathering proof. It was about staying one step ahead of a man who'd spent years making sure no one ever dared to look too closely. A man who now had reason to. From that moment on, every object in the house had to be placed just so. Every camera angle triple-checked. Every excuse rehearsed like lines in a play where the price of forgetting wasn't just failure, but danger. The tension in the walls had a new name. Suspicion. And Liam knew this was only the beginning. The night air inside the house was different, thicker somehow. Still, but charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Liam sat on the edge of his bed, legs drawn in, arms wrapped tight around his knees. He wasn't pretending to sleep tonight, not even trying. His eyes were fixed on the glowing red digits of the clock on his nightstand. 11:42 p.m. Down the hall, the television had long since gone quiet, but Mark's voice hadn't. It started the way it always did, grumbling, barely audible through the walls. But as the minutes ticked on, it got louder. More jagged, more broken. Liam could hear the clink of glass, the scrape of a chair, then a crash. He flinched, even though he'd known it was coming. Another crash, then shouting. Words slurred, stretched, cracking under the weight of too much alcohol and too many years of silence. Liam couldn't make them out clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. Accusation, domination, contempt. "Don't walk away from me." That one he caught, clear as a whip crack. Liam stood, moved quietly to his door, pressed his ear against the wood. The shouting grew closer. Then came the footsteps, heavy, stumbling, angry. Then came her voice, not a scream, not words, just a soft gasp. Then the dragging sound, not long, not violent, but real. He didn't need to see it. He could imagine it too well. Mark's shadow looming. Emma's resistance, small and quiet. The grip on her wrist or her arm, or maybe just her shirt collar. The pulling, the breathless protest. Then the sound he hated most, the bedroom door slamming shut like a coffin lid. He turned to his desk and reached for the laptop. With hands that didn't shake, but felt like they should, he clicked into the feed from the living room camera. And there it was, grainy but unmistakable. Mark stumbling past the edge of the couch, hand clutching Emma's arm. Her eyes were wide, pleading but silent. He shoved the door open, dragged her in, then slammed it. The image froze at the final frame, just before the door shut completely. Emma, half visible, mouth open, eyes glassy. Then black. Liam hit record on the audio app on his phone and set it on the desk. He sat and listened. At first, there was nothing. Then the muffled sound of something breaking, maybe glass, maybe a picture frame. Then came the worst part, the crying, except it wasn't loud. It wasn't even fully voiced. It was choked, as if someone had placed a hand over her mouth, as if someone was trying to cry through silence. Then Mark's voice again, guttural, gutted, swearing through his teeth. "You always ruin everything." The phone kept recording. Liam couldn't move. He sat there, nails digging into the side of his leg so hard he thought he might bleed. He wanted to run down the hall, throw the door open, scream at the top of his lungs. But he didn't, because he couldn't stop what was happening in that room. But he could capture it. His phone lit up. Audio levels jumped across the screen. He checked the timestamp. 5 minutes, 6, 7. It felt like hours. The noises ebbed. Glass crunching underfoot. A sob swallowed halfway. Footsteps pacing, then stopping. Then a long silence. No slamming, no screaming. Just the kind of quiet that didn't feel safe. He waited another 10 minutes before he stood. Eased toward his door. Pressed his ear to the wood again. Nothing. He moved back to the desk. Paused the recording. Labeled it night recording, bedroom incident. Then, with breath caught between teeth, he pulled the video feed again and took screenshots, frame by frame, of what the camera had seen. The arm grab, the dragging, the moment before the door slammed shut. He saved them all. Printed 3 of them using the old inkjet printer hidden in the closet. Each image a truth frozen in time. By the time the clock read 1:05 a.m., the hallway was silent. He opened his door and stepped into the darkness, barefoot, walking as if the floor might betray him. At the end of the hall, the bedroom door was ajar, just barely. He didn't go inside. He couldn't, but he looked and saw her. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped around herself, hair disheveled, her gaze fixed on the carpet. She hadn't heard him. She didn't know he was there, and for a second he almost turned away. But then she looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't cry, didn't blink, just looked at him like she knew. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. He just held up one finger. Wait, then turned and walked back to his room, closed the door, locked it, sat back at his desk, and began copying the recording to 3 separate folders. 2 in the cloud, one on a backup flash drive. He wasn't going to let this night vanish like so many others. Not this time. Not ever again. This was the moment. And he had it. For the first time, Liam had captured the darkness. Now he just had to decide what light to shine on it. By sunrise, Liam had barely moved from his desk. The house was quiet now. The kind of eerie silence that comes after a storm, when the air is too still, like it's holding its breath. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. His body buzzed with exhaustion, but his mind stayed sharp, alert, fixed on one thing: preservation. What he had recorded could vanish with the click of a delete key, the swipe of a hand, or the sudden crash of a laptop accidentally knocked off a desk. He knew Mark. He knew how easy it would be for this to disappear. So Liam made copies, layers of them. First, he pulled the files from the camera's memory and uploaded them onto his personal laptop. Then a flash drive, tiny, black, easy to conceal, tucked into the lining of his school backpack, behind the torn stitching of an old pocket no one ever checked. Next, he sent a copy to a cloud account under a fake name, one he'd created the night he ordered the camera. He encrypted it, added a password only he would remember: his mother's birthday. Finally, he uploaded one more version to a second cloud, linked to a secure Dropbox created for anonymous school reports. The link sat idle, waiting, just in case. It still didn't feel like enough, but it was something. The bell rang in his school's hallway like it always did. Shrill, mechanical, indifferent. Liam walked through the front doors of Maple Ridge High like every other kid that morning. Backpack on, hoodie up, eyes low. But his hands clutched the flash drive inside his bag like it was made of glass. The school felt too bright, too clean, too normal. No one there knew what he'd seen, what he'd heard, what his mother had survived. He walked past his classmates without hearing a word they said, straight to room 104. Ms. Anders was grading papers at her desk when he walked in. She looked up, surprised. She wasn't used to Liam showing up early, or talking much at all. Liam? He stood there, quiet, for a moment too long, then pulled out the flash drive and placed it gently on her desk. She looked at it, then at him. "What's this?" He swallowed. "It's important. Can you watch it, alone?" She studied his face. Something in his voice, maybe in his eyes, made her sit up straighter. Her fingers hesitated over the drive. "Is someone in danger?" she asked. Liam didn't answer right away, then he nodded, just once. Ms. Anders glanced toward the door, then closed it. She inserted the drive into her computer, opened the file. As the grainy footage played, the room fell into a different kind of silence. She didn't blink for nearly a minute. The clip showed Mark dragging Emma down the hallway, her face half lit, her mouth parted in fear. The door slamming, the muffled cries, the sound of something crashing. The screen went black after that, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. Ms. Anders turned slowly toward Liam, her mouth slightly open. Her voice, when it came, was quiet and steady. "Liam, is this your home?" He nodded. "Your father?" Again, a nod. "And your mother, is she?" "She's alive," Liam said, "but she doesn't talk. He says it was an accident. She fell down the stairs, but she didn't. I know she didn't." Ms. Anders leaned back in her chair, one hand on her forehead. Her other hand trembled slightly against the mouse. "Jesus," she whispered. Liam didn't move. He stood there like he had in the hallway outside that bedroom door. Silent, still, waiting for someone else to decide what happened next. She took a breath, deep and purposeful, then looked him dead in the eye. "Thank you for bringing this to me. You did the right thing, and I promise, I'm going to report this properly to the school counselor and the authorities. We'll follow the right steps. We'll do this carefully." Liam's throat tightened, but he managed to speak. "Will they believe it?" She didn't hesitate. "They have to." He looked down at his shoes. "Even if there's no bruises? Even if she doesn't say anything?" Her voice softened. "They'll have to believe her silence. This video, it's not just proof of what happened. It's proof of what's been hidden." She picked up the flash drive and held it with both hands, like something fragile and sacred. "I need to keep this," she said. "Is that okay?" He nodded. "I have other copies. She almost smiled at that. Almost. I want you to know, Liam, this won't be easy. But you've done something most adults wouldn't have the courage to do. Liam didn't respond. He didn't want praise. He wanted his mother to be safe. That was it. She looked at him again, more softly this time. Are you okay? He paused, then whispered, Not really. And that was the most honest thing he'd said in a long time. She nodded. We'll take it from here, she said gently. But if anything happens, anything, you come straight to me. He nodded again and turned toward the door. As he left the classroom, the bell rang again, ushering in students who laughed, shoved each other, and passed without a clue. But behind room 104's door, something had shifted. A teacher now held the truth, and Liam had just turned his silence into a weapon. It started with the sound of a drawer slamming, then another, and another. Liam froze mid-step on the stairs, his fingers tightening around the railing. The sun had barely touched the tops of the trees outside. The house was quiet except for the storm brewing in the bedroom down the hall. Mark was tearing through everything. He'd found the floorboard, the hidden space, and the missing journal. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. He moved back, quietly, down the stairs, just as Mark's voice tore through the ceiling. Emma, where is it? The drawer slammed again, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the wall. Liam didn't run. He couldn't. His legs wouldn't move. Seconds later, the bedroom door crashed open and Mark's boots pounded against the floor like war drums. Liam was still at the foot of the stairs when his father appeared at the landing. His face was flushed, wild, his breathing loud, uneven, and in his hand, his empty hand, was the accusation. His eyes locked onto Liam like crosshairs. You, Mark said, voice low, almost whispering. You little shit. Liam didn't respond. He didn't blink. You were in my room, Mark growled, taking a step down. You were in my goddamn room. Liam swallowed the fear in his throat. I was looking for my charger. Mark laughed, short and humorless. Bullshit. Another step. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know when things get moved? When shit disappears? Liam didn't move. Mark reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped barely a foot away. Where is it? He snarled. Where's the damn notebook? Liam shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. Mark's face twisted. Don't lie to me. He reached out and grabbed Liam's collar. Liam didn't fight it, but his breath caught. His fists curled at his sides, every muscle in his body screaming to hit back, to run, to scream. And then, before he could react, Emma stepped between them. She appeared like a shadow, like a breath of air that had turned into steel. No words, just her body between them. She looked at Mark, then slowly, silently shook her head. No. Mark's jaw clenched. His hand was still clutching Liam's shirt, but his grip loosened just enough. You trying to protect him now? He spat. You think I don't know what this is? You think I don't see it? You've been writing things down, turning him against me. Emma didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, frail, pale, her lips sealed by scars and silence. But in her stillness, she said everything. Mark looked from her to Liam. His breathing grew shallower, less from anger now and more from confusion. You planned this together? He muttered. Emma raised her hand slowly, and again shook her head. No, but it didn't matter. Mark saw what he wanted to see. He shoved away from Liam, storming past them toward the kitchen. The cabinet slammed. A bottle clinked. He was unraveling, and now he knew something was missing. Liam stood motionless as his mother turned back toward him. Her face said everything she couldn't. Fear, regret, and something else. Something quiet but fierce. She was done letting him take it all. They couldn't yell. They couldn't fight with fists. But they could resist with presence. With choices. Liam whispered, I'm okay. Emma nodded slowly, her hand brushing his shoulder just once, before she turned to follow Mark into the kitchen. Not because she trusted him, but because she knew Liam needed space. Back in his room, Liam closed the door and collapsed into the desk chair. He stared at the wall for a long time. Mark knew. There was no going back now. No more pretending. No more waiting. This was war, and silence would no longer protect anyone. The patrol car rolled up just past noon. It didn't blare its siren. It didn't flash its lights. It arrived quietly, like a shadow stretching across the snow-lined driveway. Liam saw it first through the kitchen window. Two officers stepped out. One male, one female. Both in navy blue, both with the look of people who had seen too much and not enough all at once. They moved with calm professionalism, but their eyes scanned the house like they were reading a threat level off the siding. Inside, Mark was at the sink, rinsing a beer can from the night before. When the knock came, his head snapped up. His body stiffened for a second, just one, but enough for Liam to catch it. Emma froze in place. She had been folding towels. Now her hands dropped, fingers twitching against the fabric. Mark glanced toward the door, then over his shoulder toward Emma and Liam. "What the hell?" Another knock, firmer this time. Liam stood. "I'll get it." He didn't wait for permission. The moment he opened the door, the officer in front, Officer Ramirez, according to her badge, offered a thin, practiced smile. "Afternoon? This the Santos residence?" Liam nodded. She raised a clipboard. "We're responding to a report made through the mandated reporter system at Maple Ridge High. We need to speak with your parents." Liam stepped aside without a word. Emma hadn't moved. Mark was already putting on his smile, the one he used when he wanted to appear harmless, when the cops pulled him over for speeding or when neighbors passed by too slowly near the mailbox. "Officers," he greeted smoothly, drying his hands on a dish towel. "What's this about?" They didn't return the smile. "Mr. Santos," Officer Ramirez said, "we received a report regarding potential domestic violence occurring in this home." Mark blinked, laughed, almost incredulously. "Domestic violence?" Liam watched the performance begin. Emma hadn't made a sound. But her body, it was vibrating. Her hands twisted into each other. Her breath came shallow. Mark turned to gesture toward her. "My wife, Emma, she's had a hard year. After her accident, she hasn't been quite right. Emotionally, I mean. It's made things difficult." He looked back at the officers, head tilting like he was sharing some burdensome truth. "She's nonverbal, and she tends to get confused, paranoid even. I think maybe someone misunderstood something she said." Emma flinched just slightly. Ramirez's eyes moved toward her. Sharp, noticing. "Ma'am," she said gently, "are you okay?" Emma didn't answer. Couldn't. She looked at the floor. Officer Ramirez stepped in closer, lowering her voice. "Do you feel safe in this house?" Emma's shoulders tensed. Liam's fists clenched at his sides. Then, slowly, Emma looked up. She didn't speak, but her eyes met the officer's, and she shook her head. Mark chuckled. "See what I mean? She's easily overwhelmed." Officer Ramirez held her gaze steady on Emma. The male officer standing by Mark now shifted slightly, less casual, more alert. "Do you mind if we take a walk around? Speak with each of you separately?" Ramirez asked. "Of course," Mark said. "We have nothing to hide." But something in his voice was tighter now, stretched thin. Liam stepped back as Ramirez gestured for Emma to follow her outside. Emma hesitated, then obeyed. Her steps were small, deliberate, like she was walking through fog. The male officer, Officer Blake, motioned toward the living room. "Mr. Santos, let's sit. I've got a few questions for you." Mark exhaled. "Sure, absolutely." Liam stayed behind in the hallway, listening. He couldn't hear the words, just the cadence, the rise and fall of voices. Mark's voice tried to stay light, but it cracked, just once. Outside, Emma and Officer Ramirez stood near the porch railing. The snow had melted just enough to show patches of dead grass beneath. The wind pushed at Emma's coat. She didn't shiver. Ramirez knelt slightly, voice low and calm. Emma nodded, then slowly lifted her left sleeve, just high enough. Liam couldn't see what was beneath it, but he saw the way the officer's expression changed. She stood up and walked straight back into the house. Minutes later, the two officers reconvened at the door. Mark stood nearby, hands on his hips. "So?" he asked. "We done here?" Ramirez gave him a look that wasn't quite a smile. "We're not placing anyone under arrest today," she said. "But based on what we've seen and heard, we're officially filing a report with the department. There will be follow-up interviews. A social worker will be assigned to monitor this situation." Mark's jaw clenched. "That's ridiculous." Ramirez didn't flinch. "Additionally, Under Section 28 of Provincial Family Safety Law, we're issuing a temporary protection order. Effective immediately, you are to maintain a minimum of 100 feet from Mrs. Santos at all times unless accompanied by a third-party mediator. You can't be serious. I'm very serious, she said. Mark's voice dropped. This is my house. It's also the scene of an open investigation, Officer Blake said quietly. Mark's eyes flicked to Liam just for a moment, just long enough to say, "You did this." Then back to Ramirez. "Fine," he snapped, "but I want this on record. I've done nothing wrong." "It's already on record," she said. They turned and left. The door closed behind them, and everything went still. Liam let out the breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. Emma stood in the hallway, her arms at her sides. He walked toward her. She didn't cry, but her hand found his, and for the first time in years, they stood side by side. Protected, if only for now. The house was quieter now. Not peaceful, not yet, but quieter in a way that made the walls feel less like they were bracing for impact. Mark was gone, temporarily, complying with the protective order under the eyes of police and social services. He hadn't packed much, just stormed out with a duffel and a muttered threat Liam couldn't quite hear. And once the door shut behind him, something strange and fragile settled over the house. Emma exhaled. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a slow, steady breath, as if for the first time in years her lungs had room. She sat at the kitchen table that afternoon, the light from the window catching in her hair. In front of her, a pen, a legal pad. Her fingers hovered, then touched the paper. Liam stood nearby watching quietly. It had started the night before. Emma had asked for a fresh notebook, and since then, she hadn't stopped writing. Page after page. Her handwriting a mix of smooth curves and jittery edges. Some lines steady, others marked with shaking ink and blotted tears. She didn't let Liam read them at first. She just wrote, and he let her, until this morning. She slid the stack across the table and looked up at him. He hesitated, then sat. The first line hit him in the chest. "If I never speak aloud again, let these words be the sound of who I was." She wrote everything, from the first time Mark slammed the door and called it passion, to the last time he whispered in her ear, "If you leave, no one will believe you." She wrote about the fall, about the bruises that didn't show, about the day Liam asked why she always smiled with her eyes down. She wrote about the silence, the fear, the lie that kept her surviving but never safe. Liam's hands trembled as he turned the pages. When he reached the last one, the ink had smudged, probably a tear that landed before it dried. "I'm not afraid anymore, not because he's gone, but because you stayed." Liam blinked fast. His throat burned. When he looked up, Emma's eyes were already watching him. He cleared his voice. "Can we make this into something more official? Like a letter? For court?" She nodded. They worked together at the table, reshaping paragraphs, correcting grammar, but keeping the heart exactly as it was. Every sentence was hers, every line a wound stitched with ink. Liam printed it on clean paper in large, clear font and slid it back to her with a pen. Emma held it in both hands like it weighed more than it should. Then, slowly, carefully, she signed her name. The E trembled. The rest followed like breath after drowning. It was the first time she had signed anything in months. When she was done, she placed the pen down and stared at the signature for a long moment. Her fingers traced over the lines. Liam reached into his backpack and pulled out the small camera. Emma looked at it, then back at him. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. She nodded once, and he hit record. Emma sat upright in the chair. The letter was in her lap. She didn't read it out loud. She couldn't, but she moved her fingers across the paper as if every word still lived in her skin. Then she looked at the camera and began. She didn't speak, but her hands told the story. She lifted the letter, eyes locked on the lens, and began gesturing. Slowly, deliberately, using sign, gestures, and the simplest tools she had left. Her face. Her brows furrowed at the part about Liam as a child. Her eyes narrowed when she mimed slamming doors. Her hand touched her throat when she signed the word hurt. And when she reached the last page, she stopped. Her hands fell, and she looked directly into the camera. Tears brimmed but didn't fall. Instead, she lifted her hand, extended her fingers, and pointed at herself. Then pointed at Liam. Then, softly, delicately, she touched her heart. The moment hung in the air like a suspended breath. Liam turned the camera off. Emma exhaled. He didn't say anything at first. Just walked to her, kneeled beside the chair, and wrapped his arms around her waist. She rested her chin on his head, her hand moving gently through his hair. The letter sat on the table now. A confession, a statement, a declaration. But more than anything, a voice, her voice, and no one could take it away again. The doorknob rattled first. A sharp, angry twist, metal scraping metal, then again, harder. Liam's head jerked up from the couch. Emma froze mid-step in the hallway, a mug of tea trembling in her hand. Then came the voice. "Open the damn door!" Liam moved quickly, grabbing the phone from the coffee table. He slipped it into his hoodie pocket, hitting record on the audio app with one smooth motion. The door shook violently. "I said open this effing door! You think you can lock me out of my own house?" Then it happened. The door slammed open with a sickening crack, wood splintering near the hinges. Mark burst through, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched, rage practically steaming off his skin. He wasn't drunk, at least not like usual, but something else had snapped. Something unhinged. Emma gasped, backing against the wall. "You really think you can take me down?" Mark bellowed. "You think this is over? That you two can pull this little stunt behind my back?" His boots pounded across the floor. "You've been playing me, both of you." He looked wild, more animal than man, spit flying from his mouth as he snarled. Liam stepped forward, hands trembling but firm. "Leave. Now." Mark's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Liam said, voice low, steady despite the thundering in his chest. "You're not supposed to be here. There's a restraining order." Mark laughed, a short, sharp sound that barely masked the fury beneath. "You think that piece of paper's gonna stop me?" Liam didn't answer. Instead, he shifted slightly, angling his pocket toward Mark, the phone still recording every breath, every word. "You called the cops on your own father?" Mark spat. "You're not a man. You're a traitor." Liam stood his ground. "You're not a father, not to us." The words seemed to tear something loose in Mark. He lunged. Liam tried to step back, but Mark was too fast. His hand slammed into Liam's shoulder, shoving him hard into the wall. Liam hit it with a sickening thud and crumpled to the floor, pain shooting through his ribs. Emma screamed without a sound, just a strangled breath, as she moved to Liam's side. Mark raised his hand again, and that's when the siren split the silence. A red and blue glow flashed through the broken front door as two officers burst in. Ramirez in front, Blake behind. "Hands in the air," she shouted. "Now!" Mark froze mid-motion. The look in his eyes flickered from fury to confusion to fear, but it was too late. Blake moved in, grabbing Mark's wrist, wrenching his arm behind his back. Mark didn't resist. He couldn't. The shock was too complete. His breath came in ragged bursts. "You're in violation of a court-issued protection order," Officer Ramirez said coldly. "You're under arrest." Mark didn't say a word, not this time. He just stared at Liam on the floor, eyes wide, teeth clenched, as if trying to burn something into memory, as if trying to make sure Liam never forgot. But Liam had already recorded everything. He reached into his hoodie and pulled out the phone, still recording, still catching Mark's voice, his threats, the crash of the door. Ramirez saw it and nodded. "That's going straight into evidence." Emma crouched beside Liam, hands hovering over his arms, his chest, making sure he was okay. Her fingers shook as they touched his hair. He winced but nodded. "I'm all right." The handcuffs clicked behind Mark's back. Ramirez glanced down. "You did good, kid. You stayed calm." Liam nodded again, slower this time. Because in that moment, with Mark finally restrained, Emma beside him, and the truth no longer trapped in silence, he realized something. This wasn't just the end of a nightmare. It was the beginning of a life. The courtroom was colder than it should have been, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the weight inside it. Like the walls had absorbed years of stories, each one too heavy to forget. Emma sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes focused on the grain of the wood before her, unmoving. She hadn't spoken a word in nearly a year, But today, she didn't have to. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Mark sat across the room, dressed in a borrowed suit that did nothing to hide the twitch in his jaw, the bruised pride in his eyes. His hands were cuffed, though hidden beneath the table. His lawyer whispered something to him, but Mark didn't respond. His gaze instead drifted toward Emma. She didn't blink. Beside her, Liam sat clutching the folder they had built together. Truth printed on paper and sealed with trembling hands. When the court was called to order, the prosecutor stood. "Your Honor," she began, "the evidence presented in this case is clear, consistent, and corroborated across multiple sources. What we have here is not hearsay. It is a documented history of psychological and physical abuse. It is a mother silenced not by accident, but by violence." She walked to the bench, her steps sure. She held up a flash drive. This contains video evidence, recorded by the defendant's son, Liam Santos. The footage shows Mr. Mark Santos forcibly dragging his wife into a room, followed by sounds of breaking objects and muffled crying. She placed the drive on the evidence tray. Next, she lifted a stack of handwritten pages. This is Emma Santos's personal journal, written over the course of 7 years. It chronicles instances of emotional terror, physical assault, and threats made toward both herself and her son. These entries are supported by timestamps, names, and details consistent with witness recollections. The judge glanced over his glasses, nodding. Then came the final piece. Liam stood. His heart thudded in his ears. He approached slowly, placing the final document into the tray. "My mother's letter," he said softly. "She wrote it after he was gone, after she felt safe enough." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. The prosecutor took the letter and read it aloud. Every word landed like a dropped stone. "If I never speak again, let this letter be my voice. I was afraid. I was hurt. But I am not broken. And I will not stay silent any longer." At the final sentence, the courtroom stayed still. Emma raised her head and looked straight at Mark. He tried to hold her gaze, but he couldn't. For once, she wasn't small, wasn't fragile. She was unmoved, unapologetic. A silence filled the room, one that said more than arguments ever could. Then the judge leaned forward. "The court has reviewed all submitted evidence, including audio and visual recordings, written testimony, and corroborative statements from school officials and law enforcement." He looked directly at Mark. "Mr. Santos, the evidence against you is overwhelming." Mark's face twitched, but he didn't speak. "This court finds you guilty of felony domestic assault, emotional endangerment of a minor, and violation of a protection order." A pause. "You are hereby sentenced to 7 years in state prison without parole." Liam exhaled. He didn't realize he'd been holding his breath. Mark didn't look at him, didn't look at Emma. He stared at the wall as officers moved to escort him out. Emma didn't flinch. She simply watched him go, not with fear, but with finality. A door had closed, and not just the one behind him. The new apartment wasn't big. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a creaky floorboard near the hallway closet, and a window that faced the morning sun. But it was theirs. Emma stood by the kitchen counter, unpacking plates one by one. She moved slower now, not because she was tired, but because there was no longer anything chasing her. Liam sat cross-legged on the living room floor, laptop open, wires splayed around him like veins. He was coding, quietly focused, the way he always did when something mattered more than he could say out loud. On the screen, a mock-up of an app interface blinked back at him, a simple grid of buttons, each labeled with words or phrases Emma used often. Some were basic: yes, no, thank you. Others were more personal: I'm proud of you. Tell me again. Hot tea? It was crude for now, but it worked. He tested a button. The laptop spoke. How was your day? The voice was mechanical, slightly too bright but clear. Emma looked over from the kitchen. Her eyes widened just slightly. Liam clicked another. I love you. Emma's lips parted. Not quite a smile, but close. She wiped her hands on a towel and came to kneel beside him. He turned the screen toward her and handed her the mouse. She hesitated, then clicked. I'm okay today. The voice echoed through the quiet apartment, and something shifted in the air. Liam looked up. Emma looked down. And then finally, slowly, her shoulders shook. Not with fear, but with laughter. A small, breathless sound slipped from her throat. A half gasp, half chuckle. She covered her mouth with her hand, but her eyes were shining. Liam laughed too, unsure why exactly, but sure that it was right. They laughed together, for the first time in years. It didn't last long. It didn't have to. It was enough. Later that night, they sat on the old couch, now theirs, watching a documentary with the captions turned on. Emma sipped from a mug of chamomile tea. Liam leaned against the armrest, feet tucked under him, fingers still tapping code between bites of leftover lasagna. He showed her how to add new words to the app. She scribbled them on a pad. Hope, brave, safe. He typed each one in. The next morning, Liam woke up to the voice assistant chirping from the dining table. Good morning, sunshine. He rubbed his eyes and stumbled out of his room to find Emma already dressed, sitting with her hands poised over the keyboard, a mischievous glint in her eye. She clicked again. Don't forget your homework. He groaned. You're going to regret this, power. Emma grinned, silent but victorious. The app wasn't perfect. The apartment still needed curtains. The future was uncertain. But they were rebuilding. One word, one look, one line of code at a time. And for the first time in Liam's memory, their home didn't echo with fear. It echoed with something warmer. Laughter, connection, voice. Liam clicked publish without hesitation. He sat at the edge of his bed, back against the wall, watching the screen blink for a second. Then refresh. His blog post went live. Title, The Voice We Almost Lost. The opening line was simple. My mother hasn't spoken in over a year, but last month she said more than words ever could. He told the whole story. Not with rage, not with vengeance, but with quiet precision and aching clarity. He told readers about the night the door broke open, the day the courtroom fell silent as Emma stared down the man who silenced her. He told them about the journal, the letter, the video, and the voice they thought was gone forever, but had only been waiting for the right moment to return. By morning, the post had been shared thousands of times. By afternoon, hundreds of comments had filled the page. I've never cried this hard over a stranger. This is the bravest kind of love. I see you, I hear you, both of you. News outlets picked it up. Advocacy groups reached out. A women's shelter in British Columbia requested to feature Emma's video in their next campaign. Liam didn't do interviews. He didn't need credit. This wasn't about him. It was about her. It was about survival, in all the forms no one writes poems about. The kind that looks like whispered hands and open apps. The kind that rises from silence, not to shout, but to stand. 1 week after the blog post went viral, Liam took a photo of Emma. She was sitting in the backyard, in a fold-out chair, the late spring sun warming her pale cheeks. Around her, wind rustled through the wild grass, touching her hair the way words never could. The tablet sat on her lap, open. The app Liam had built now ran on a sleek new interface, gifted by a tech group that saw his blog and reached out. She clicked a button. The voice spoke. Con Jean Kumi, Theokash me shua tung dam mojen. Liam looked up from his phone. Emma's eyes met his. And then, she smiled. Not just with her lips, but with her whole face. With the kind of soft, relieved brightness that belongs to someone who once thought they'd never be seen again. Liam smiled back. He didn't reply with words. He just reached over and squeezed her hand. The camera, still recording, captured that moment. The light, the wind, the soft artificial voice echoing something more human than anything ever spoken. That final scene would become the last frame of the video now seen by over 4 million people. Emma's face in the sun, her voice through the machine, Liam by her side, and beneath the image, as the music swelled, something warm, simple, and healing, the screen faded to black, and a single sentence appeared. Some wounds don't need words, they only need to be believed.